Hey, what's up, everybody? I am your host, Aseer the Radio-Aseer, along with my co-host, Melina Emerson, 10,000 years. You are now tuned in live to Super Heru Radio, rocking with the best, along with Amor, Saga Sky. All of you, thank you for coming through once again, holding us down, and keeping up with what it is we have to do here as we move closer, ever closer, or closer to the ascension protocols that we need to walk up out of this reality, inshallah, you know. So as it stands now, we're at the halfway mark. We're about 6 months in until December, you know what I mean, when the big parties start. So, of course, like any people who are scrambling to get things done within a certain dead time or within a certain amount of time, the adversary, the enemy, the powers that be are scrambling and running around like fire rabbits with their heads cut off, trying to figure out like how to slow down the actual progress or progression of us. And when I say us, I mean those within the U.S. who are seeking and know that this reality is not all there is. So when I say that, I'm talking about a privileged few who have agreed to allow their actions to reflect their words, and who are striving to keep both, one and both, working interchangeably together. So based on that, you know, there are going to be a lot of different things, like we were talking about last week, that kind of come in the game and try to, like, throw salt on it, when there's really no way or nothing that these people, and when I say these people, I'm talking about the adversary, a.k.a. the enemy, can really do to impede the progress of the Most High. You know what I'm saying? Any plan forged against the Creator or the will of the Almighty Creator is a plan to fail. You know what I'm saying? Because, again, you can't get around that. Because, see, the one thing that I realized when I got into consciousness and came into this, and I started building and you know, researching and dealing with different people and going to lectures and talking to people and sitting, quote-unquote, at the foot of the great masters or the master teachers or the, quote-unquote, master teachers or whatever you want to call them, and people who are allegedly out here giving all this knowledge. And one thing that I noticed, and again, maybe it's just me, all of these are my assessments. So I don't want nobody to take nothing personal, like I'm trying to come out against anybody individually. That's not my point. And anybody that's been on the show all these years, no, that's not how we get down. What I'm talking about, though, is the acumen that has basically come to represent us as the quote-unquote conscious community. But as much as we talk about consciousness, a lot of us are not dealing with awareness. And part of being able to be conscious is about being able to comprehend that which you need to sustain oneself. So there's an enzyme in your body, a chemical in your body that dictates almost any and everything. So like you have an enzyme in your body that is only there, for instance, show you how like minuscule but how necessary some of the most inane aspects of human reality is. Put it down, please. What you wind up dealing with is, leave these alone. What you wind up dealing with is situations where we, as those who are striving to be outside of this, are now in a position where the closer we're getting to get out of it, the more people are doing it, the more people are doing to almost anchor themselves further into the reality itself, further into this reality themselves. It's almost like the more that they could get free, the more they're scared of the freedom. So they do things to lock themselves down, to keep themselves in the same strata. So just when we, for instance, were coming to a state where we were, in a sense, coalescing our energy into a certain way, we remember that certain things happened within the community that started to disenfranchise different members of the community from it, right? So before every quote-unquote nation gets together, there's always a civil war, always. And that civil war is what usually dictates what part of the nation is going to be put above the next. Now, going all the way back to almost pre-dynastic Kemet, most wars in this society or in most societies, if anything, are usually fought between opposing polarities in longitude. You know what I mean? Or longitude or latitude, meaning that most wars that go down usually happen between the northern and southern regions of a place, more so than the eastern and western aspects of that. An example of an eastern versus western war would be what the British East India Company did with China, whereas another version, or modern-day version of the whole north and south war polarity, we could use as an example what happened recently in the Sudan, and how they split the Sudan into North and South Sudan. Now, people who are from Sudan, right, or quote-unquote Sudanese people, know that that's not even the name that that place was prior to World War II, but that's the name that the people re-indoctrinated to accept as their nationality now. But most of the African countries and societies get put through 10 to 15 years of renewal and destruction. So they go through about where, let's say, for the first 10 years, let's say after reclamation, after the decolonialization of whatever African nation or whatever, then that African nation now that's free has maybe about 10 full years of freedom before the rebel situation starts up in the country. And then once the rebels, when you hear them start talking about rebels coming up in the country, then after you get the rebels, you start hearing them talk about the militias. Then after they start talking the militias and the rebels, then they start talking about insurgents once they decide that they're going to use this as a means to run up in these people's country and kill everybody. So as it stands now, what we perceive as something like Al-Qaeda, we already know is really just the Arabic CIA desk. They actually call the CIA, they actually call it CI Al-Qaeda. That's actually the name on the low to those people in the know that know what's going on with that. United States practices what they call rodeos. The person don't know what a rodeo is. To a layman person, a rodeo is, we got the bull in the ring and we got the clowns and the guy, the cowboy tries to ride him and, jumps off without hopefully getting gorged, right? Well, a rodeo in intelligence is something totally different. A rodeo in intelligence is when they create a situation where things look one way and actually something totally different is going on. So the rodeo that they flipped in the whole Libya thing was that, this dude Gaddafi was crazy or whatever, when really the whole Libya contingent was really used as a means to destabilize the situation so they can run from Libya right into, Syria and so forth and so on, which they did. But what they didn't tell you was that 200 African kings got together 3 months before Gaddafi came out, and he went to them and basically told them that he would match whatever they had in gold and resources if they would all agree that Africa could have its own united currency, which would be specifically gold and silver, which would mean that based on this, the gold that just is out there in Africa in certain places. Like I said, some of the diamonds in Africa is alluvial, meaning you could just pick them up off the ground. You know what I mean? So what do the corporations do? They come and lease the ground so that way if you're picking up the diamonds off that ground under the terms of that lease, you then get locked up. But instead of getting locked up, remember the white man need people to come and actually mine the diamonds. So what then he do, part of your work release, is to now be a slave to basically go into the diamond mine and basically mine all the diamonds to work off your prison sentence. Now, on one side of this equation, you've got, grimy Africans that's doing what they're doing to kind of enslave their own people and come up, which means that it's not really about nationality or color or melanin or us as a people when dealing with those people. But then on the other side now, let's talk about where these diamonds in the system that employs them come from. We already know. We heard the record, Diamonds Are Forever by Kanye West. But at the same time, we knew this was going on before all of that. So with this whole coming war that they're about to take to Syria openly. This is really just a pretense for them to put Russia in a prime position, because really what's going on is you've got lunatics running your country right now. White America, this is a message for those Caucasian listeners that are listening. You know what I'm saying? We're Superhero Radio. We're equal opportunity truth tellers. So I'll be just as hard on crackers as I am on my own people. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of my own people act like crackers now. And unfortunately, when somebody like myself will come out and say that, there'll be a certain contingency of my own people who will be totally against that, or they don't like that. You know what I'm saying? They be on that, we all, everybody got to take their time and get there where they need to. No doubt, I believe in that too. However, if you are in this constant state of driving and pushing yourself to the heights of your own levels of perfection and excellence, and you slow your own progress down to bring somebody else up based on what you think that they are, as though, based on what once they think or know or whatever they are, then what happens is you have now switched places with that. It looks great. You have now switched places with this person then. You know what I'm saying? Meaning that you have to slow your vibration down to let them catch up, so that way potentially y'all can move up together. But the last time a system like that worked, and it did work, I would say, was the Panthers. But they already checked that system, remember? The whole Black Panther, Black national militant aspect of Black American culture, whatever, remember, they checked that. One of our last hopes for that quote-unquote armed revival, or whatever you want to call it, armed revolution, was Khalid Muhammad, man. That's in my opinion again. I was just saying my opinion. He was one of the only people that I know, when I listened to him speak, and again, I don't feel like I could be influenced by anyone, but when I would listen to that brother, I would be ready to get it in. You know what I'm saying? Like, he would get me amped. You know what I'm saying? Because the shit he was saying was not only true, it was factual, and he was so eloquent with it, again, but you also knew that he was ready to get it in. I also liked when he, would come around, or when the first time they tried to out him, and he actually built on, with Steve Copley, actually, peace be upon him, bless his dead, he actually built on it with Steve Copley, and Steve Copley helped build with him on the lecture, and basically went through the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? So I know that in order for Bill Clinton and them to move up in New York, they was going to have to get rid of him. But then in that now, we are faced with this whole new thing in terms of this vacuum when it comes to the goal. What is our option? What is the goal to all of this? What is the point? What is the thing that we are doing to move forward with all of this stuff? You know what I'm saying? Where is this going to lead us? What do we have as institutions established by us for us on some FUBU shit? You know what I'm saying? Like, what do we have in our community like that? Who in our community is even thinking about the greater community in a mass level like that? Not many people. So what we have is that when it really comes to certain essential protocols and everything, it's not really about everybody getting there. It's about those people who are striving to get there being there. So what I'm trying to tell you, brothers and sisters, is that you are almost absolved at this point based upon a lot of the astrological stuff that's going on, like Saturn going direct to Scorpio coming up on Friday, going to be Friday 13th. Like, a lot of stuff has freed up and freed us up to not have to worry and intone ourselves into arguments and situations that have nothing to do with us. Because they love doing that to the conscious community. They love bringing new bullshit arguments for you to get wrapped up in, so that way you be so heated and so amazed that brothers are so intelligent to be so asinine, and then before you know it, you've been totally discouraged and disenfranchised from the overall movement itself. But as they say, one bad apple don't spoil the whole bunch. Most of these guys have already started to reveal themselves. So you, as the people, it is your job now to discern what you want to give your energy to and what you don't. And now is not a time for you to make instances where or useless or needless sacrifices where you don't have to. Like I said, the time is past, man. If you want some quote-unquote occult magic shit and you still cutting chickens open, and you still cutting cows and stuff like that open, it's done for you, man. The time to do all of that stuff is over. You understand? Because the thing is, nowadays, half of these Babalaos and these people doing these rituals and stuff, half of these niggas are Freemasons anyway. So a lot of them don't even really believe in it the way they could have believed in it at the point, so they just kind of running through the motions themselves. Then the ones that do know, on the other hand, right, they got to be careful because they can't even do work for certain people nowadays. Because certain people just automatically have the negative thought form attached to them that if the Babalao or the priestess or the Hogan or whoever go and actually try to do work with them to help free them, that the entity that made the agreement to control this person, turn this person into a host, will then try to turn and attack the Hogan, or the priestess or whoever. So when they talk about guilt by association, that's not just like a physical term. That's something that deals with you on a spiritual term too, man. You know what I'm saying? Like nowadays, like things are so bad, yo. I was on World Star the other day, and they were showing this man how he had sex with some girl called maggots. He had maggots coming out the front of the head of his penis, man, running back and forth like little ants. Looked like 50 of them. In a world where you can have sex with somebody, put your penis in this person and pull it out, and then to have maggots, you know what I'm saying? Like, this you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm almost speechless. I'm almost just so, like, disgusted by the whole thing. Like, it was so traumatizing to see something like that and to know that this came out of someone. You know what I mean? Like, someone has this inside of their body, and it's so disgusting and hateful that they would actually have sex to pass the damn maggot on. That's how you know you're not dealing with somebody. You have the sex with women with maggots or men with maggots in they thing. Worse, they got the other type of sexual disease that when you stick your thing in, you pull it out. You wind up having some type of flesh-eating disease. This is the new thing popping off in China. Another thing, too, man, we were one of the first people to talk about this on the show. Brothers in the hood, especially the young brothers that super Heruians or no young brothers that's in the hood like that, man. Get your homies to get off of that K2 shit, man. Don't let them make you feel like K2 is somehow better than weed, man. It's better you smoke a blunt than a half a joint of that. Because that is the shit, that K2 shit. Huh? That K2 stuff is, hey, buddy. That K2 stuff is the same as the bath salt shit. And all of that is what's called the cosmetic, all of those are cosmetic drugs. Those are drugs that are manufactured specifically by elements of the government to induce and create different aspects in the host subject that it's applied to. For them to make K2 legal, when that shit is basically a cocktail. The same cocktail that they gave Heath Ledger and all of them. Like whenever you hear somebody in an autopsy, they'll get an autopsy, and the coroner come back and say, oh, they had drugs. They had drugs in their system. They had, crack, cocaine, GHB, marijuana, PCP, Vicodin, Oxycontin, this, that. That is called a cocktail. That does not mean that the person put all of that shit into their system, you know what I'm saying, and then just died off of one of those things. No. That cocktail was basically created to kill that person whose the autopsy is on. And again, we've all seen enough movies, read enough books about this whole thing to know how it goes down. But what surprises me is that we still will sometimes disavow and act like this is what it is. But I tell you where that comes from. It comes from a feeling of apathy. It also comes from a feeling of intense, almost indifference, because you don't even know what to do anymore. Like, You walk down the street and see women and stuff and men and stuff, you got to wonder if they were actually born that way. You know what I'm saying? They want you to believe that being a homosexual or being gay or whatever is some type of inherent gene that basically comes online and does that. So now what they're trying to do is find what they call the gay gene. So they have spent thousands upon thousands of millions upon millions of dollars to figure this out. And they have yet to find it. But when it comes to, human genome mapping, they've already allegedly done that, though, right? So you mean to tell me you can map an entire human genome and know what chromosomes and corpuscles and capillaries go where and what busts down to what G, TTA, TTAC, or whatever, boils down to in a genetic mixture, but you can't find or isolate what makes people gay? They can't even find or isolate what makes people hungry. You understand? And these are the people who are subscribing or prescribing huge forms of pharmaceutical drugs. Don't you think it's funny that all of the legal drugs are killing everybody and all of the illegal drugs ain't? When the last time you heard somebody OD'd off of cocaine? When the last time you heard somebody OD'd off of crack? When the last time you heard somebody OD off of crystal meth or heroin or some shit like that? You ain't hear that in years because people don't do that. And the ones that have what they call hot doses, meaning that they basically got some shit that was just, you know what I mean? Like they knew it was going to take them out. But for the most part, drug dealers like drug addicts. So they will do some shit sometimes where they might put a hot dose, like what they used to do to market certain drugs is when they would go through droughts with certain drugs. Then what they would do is they would put, let's say, 100% pure shit out there, and a certain amount of people who would take the dose would die. The people who took the dose and died, that would actually be the marketing that the dealers would use to say how good the damn drug was. See what I'm saying? So it's the same thing with the United States. They have now created a system. They've now created a system where those members of it, you know what I'm saying, have now fallen into such a disarray that they don't know who's who. So they've all started to turn on each other, and in the process of turning on each other, they've opened up a lot of opportunities for those of us who are not down with any of that. So because they're in a state of political infighting, we have people like Warren Buffett that's buying up all of the silver all of a sudden, but then at the same time telling people how he's going to give all his money away. Like, shit like that don't make sense, but then on a Masonic or Freemasonic level, it totally does. Because part of their initiation is to be everything to all things and nothing to all things at the same time. So you'll have Mason or Freemason on those levels of those white male Freemasons or whatever, and they may be in positions of political power to do certain things and may actually help initiate that. But then at the same time they do something grimy and whack like that will be the same time they come out and then do something totally different, which is really good on some humanitarian shit for humanity. Because they're trying to basically play the position of the middle pillar. Anybody knows anything about occultism or Kabbalic occultism, you would know that the middle pillar is the pillar that sits between the pillar of mercy and severity. So just as merciful as you are, you have to be severe at instance too. Because no well-rounded being is just one thing. In order for you to exist here, you have to rise and become a lot of different things to figure out what your purpose and your place is here. But many of us, again, are coming here and giving false purposes based upon the allegiances that we make, thereby denying ourselves our own opportunity to fulfill whatever spiritual contract we made with ourselves before we incarnated here. But instead of us coming down here to figure it out, we wind up trying to, you know what I'm saying, justify shit and put it back on them. Them being the proverbial adversary or enemy. So again, brothers and sisters, we are at the auspicious time when it's not time for you to take on somebody else's negative karma. And just because this person may want to have this knowledge now when you was telling them 5 years ago or whatever, they was on some you crazy shit. Now they coming back to you telling you, oh, everything you saying was right. That's cool. So now it's like, now that I accept what you're saying is right, put me on to everything else. That's not your job. You already did your job by putting the person on to the knowledge when they asked or when it was presented to them by you. When you go back now, you know what I mean, and then try to re-hip them to some shit that you already put them onto, or they was totally dissing you about the shit, and then all of a sudden now, because they seen this person on it, that they want to be on it now, then, you see what I'm saying? You are now opening yourself up to somebody who potentially is not going to do anything with that knowledge. Then you have the other ones. Like me, I get, the type of haters I get are the ones that try to, one, disavow what I'm doing, or two, start a mirrored version of what I'm doing, right? Start like a mirrored version of it, and then like try to act like the shit that I've been doing ain't out, or ain't even out there, or not relevant, or it don't mean nothing, you know. So 50 million people can get, you know what I'm saying, a certain understanding about something or whatever, but then I'll put my understanding out about it, and then nothing, you know. And that's okay, because what it teaches me is that things like Facebook, things like that, are actually contained ego demons, in the sense that there's something in it that sometimes really compels you to want to comment on some shit, especially when you see something on Facebook that's so obviously contrite and obviously put together that it's got to be a damn scam or illusion or something not real. But again, that's the arena for that type of stuff to exist. So there's a part of you who sees that shit that's on some real shit that wants to just comment and expose shit and be like, nah, these niggas on some or whatever. But then that, again, is not the spirit of truth in me now with that assessment. That is the spirit of ego. The ego is seeing what's going on, and the ego, in a sense, doesn't want me or doesn't want it to be associated or people to even think that there's any association between me and them. But again, that has nothing to do with me commenting or not, you know what I'm saying, commenting on the situation. What that has to do with is my feeling the need to do so out of almost a unrealized fear that people may associate me with bullshit. That's something that I had to come to grips with in the thing and not take a lot of the emotional bait that will be put out there for me to be involved in a lot of the royal controversies that you see going down. You know, when people was obviously referring to me with certain things or whatever, I would still teach that, know that, but still have to be in a position to take the quote-unquote higher road. Not because I want to do that all the time, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm from Brooklyn, too. You know what I mean? And it's like, just because niggas is conscious and shit, it's like they'll have this warped version of history. Like, just because you conscious, you can't really express or defend yourself no how. Almost like when you become conscious, you got to just be totally passive and open to whatever anybody or anything wants to do with you. And that is mind control. That has nothing to do with consciousness. So while all of that continues, you know what I'm saying, the rest of the world spins on and on, you know. So the pyramids in China recently, there was a National Geographic wanted to do an expose on them, and the Chinese government basically not only told them no, but told them that if they was to try to really go in and mention shit like that, that they would basically try to sue them because they have not, because the Chinese state, meaning the Chinese High Command, have disavowed that the pyramids, the red, black, and green pyramids that's out there even exist. You understand? Now, all of this talk about China, you know, becoming a world superpower, everything, people still got to remember that as it stands right now still, China is still a totalitarian regime, okay? They're still communist. So they still get their money. and it's still about oppressing. But the wild shit is that they've actually, in the past couple of years, become more about humanitarian aid than the United States, which has become more draconian. Same thing with Russia. Now that Putin's back in, he's trying to make deals with the other Baltic states. Remember a couple of years ago when the Olympics went down, Chinese Olympics went down, and all the Chinese, all those thousands of Chinese was all working together in unison, in sync? That was a message. They was telling the world something. They was telling you, we are so organized that everybody in this country will be down to the same minute, same movement, down to the millisecond. So don't try to mess with us. Don't try to invade us. Don't try to do whatever. So what did the United States do? What happened the same day that happened? Georgia attacked South Ossetia, right? So on TV, the United States put it out that Russia was doing a thing and invading them. But when you look at the BBC and the other world news shit, there was actual people saying that no, that wasn't happening. They was actually the Russians actually came in to protect us from the South Ossetian government that started shooting and firing on its own people and shooting and killing its own people. Why? Because after Glasnost and after the Bosnia-Herzegovinian War, half of South Ossetia fell under the jurisdiction again. Remember the North and the South? They split North Ossetia from South Ossetia and made South Ossetia a pseudo-autonomous state under the protectorship of who? The United States. Now look in history. This is symbolic, right, of, let's say, a military tactic when Hannibal, for instance, was going to take Rome through the Alps. He did it the first time and was basically at the door. He was basically right there. To this day, they have a saying called the barbarians are at the gates in reference to Hannibal in this campaign specifically. So what he basically did was he went around the Alps basically and got right to the door to let them know, hey, I can get you anytime I want. But he didn't go all the way at that campaign. That was on the first, actually the campaign of his pops, working with his pops during the first Punic War. Then by the second one, he flipped it. This is basically symbolic to, like I said, in terms of war tactics, when the United States basically when the Russians took Germany, the United States was close to the borders of Russia. And even though the United States and Russia was allies, they were pseudo-uneasy allies because the script had already been written that the new war after this war would be against communism and capitalism. And so the psychological program that they was functioning on the United States at the time, you had a lot of people that was willing to just keep going and keep marching all the way into Russia. Also because the Russians had caught so many casualties. They lost over 1 million plus people during that World War II, campaign with Hitler and all that. But they didn't. They stopped. There's almost to say, hey, I could come there, but I'm not. So there's this thing with these Western countries and this Western, let's say, philosophy, even with some of our people, once we go up there into those places, where we start to think less like a inclusive, indigenous type people and start thinking from a more cosmopolitan, metropolitan type of understanding, because we need to fit in. Because most people who aren't, quote-unquote, white, who come to countries like this, whether or not you believe in race or not, whether or not you see people as a color or whatever, which really don't make sense to me. I don't know how you could look at somebody and say you don't notice that their skin is darker than this person. That, to me, is lying. When people say, I don't see color, then you're telling me you're colorblind. But that has nothing to do, again, you could be colorblind and still know what tone is darker than the other. You know what I'm saying? To me, that's more of an allegory saying, no, I pretend I don't see that. So all I'm saying is that in order for this country or any country to truly survive on this earth, truth has to be the main currency of the population. It's only when the government descends into hyper militarization is usually around the time that the people not only are starting to wake up, but they become so depraved in their execution of their own day-to-day lives that the government can no longer trust them. So the same government that's been out here working to rewrite history and turn it into a different faction of what it really is now the same one to control those people, and now the same one that's trying to get rid of those people that they've created. Didn't Frankenstein kill his master? So what I'm saying is that this whole ebb and flow of debt, credit, karma, dharma, all of these things were written in the Circle 7 Quran, the Bible, the Revelation, all of that. And if you know how to really spit that and understand it in a symbolic way, then you would understand how those things interplay with everyone else. So, like I was building with a brother, we were talking about the Bible, and we were talking about how a lot of brothers don't use the Circle 7 Quran because they don't really do the knowledge that there's an element in there, and even in the regular Bible that talks that when the angels, when man fell, there's a passage in Genesis that says when man fell and dwelt himself into the garden, the angels did not fall, and they did not lose their form. So in that, the angels are the elves. So that can basically be seen as a way to say that we don't come down to a lower frequency, because when we do, we then fall. You understand? So this is where the whole court thing, making special appearances and all that come in, because essentially in court you're not there. You can't be there because nothing real can exist in a court of law. Because the rule of law is the rule of man's law. But man has put himself in the opposite capacity or the opposite perspective of the Most High. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever you consider that to be. Therefore, once man let other men become their interface, or his interface and her interface with the Most High, they fell even further. In the Bible, it describes the fall as being 200 plus or 2 million plus angels falling. That 200 number basically represents the falling, meaning the actual becoming physical. Based on the 200 number being a corresponding or related number to the 200 bones in your body. That combined with the angles of light to create the flesh, thus ushering the fall of the non-spirit or the non-physical spirit in being incarnated or incorporated into a physical, meaning final element within the garden. So when you're in there quoting, instead of in there quoting stuff from some sort of treaty or statute, you got to bring it more to the correlation of your connection to the trust that was laid out by the Most High, Rumars Dubar, Government Ordinance Defense. Not the German gut or got or guff, you know. So, along with all that, right, we also have the aspect of the international commercial laws, meaning dealing with international commerce, a.k.a. UCC, being affected by this whole new upswing of corporate or government corruption about to be or being exposed consistently. No, none of us are going to be put in a position of rulership or self-governing or sovereignty or what people refer to as sovereignty, which is really self-governance. Unless we are ready. As it stands, 85% of us are not ready. Some people say it's more like 95% now that's dumb, deaf, and blind, which would then reduce the 10% to like 2%, and 10% to about 3% of that, and then the 5% really being 2%. You know what I'm saying? So really, you could take that 2 and reduce that down to, let's say, 1.2, which would then mean every 7th or 8th person you see is dealing with the consciousness that you're dealing with. Whereas the majority of the people you're seeing, let's say 9 of the people you're seeing, or the 8 people under that you're seeing, are not functioning from any level of consciousness at all. Or they're functioning from such a mundane, material aspect of that conversations with them tend to bring you down. That's why you're having such a hard time relating or feeling like you can't really talk to anyone or in that. These are some of the, I don't want to say adverse effects, but some of the effects of taking your consciousness and your indigenous history serious in a time and in a culture and in a society in which everybody is really living and eating off of it, but acting like you had nothing to do with it. So externally, it's a forced almost isolation, because then what you then find is that the more freer you become out of the cultural so-called limitations, meaning the more freer you feel from, let's say if a white person was call you nigger or something like that, or say nigger around you, the more you don't get offended by that, the more you start to see that a lot of the hurt feelings that you're getting is really coming from the fact that you don't feel like you can share the same consciousness for and verve and drive that you have for your people with your people, because most of your people don't want to hear it. Yet, to a degree, this is how it's always been. You know what I'm saying? Let's say post the flood, post-flood earth. So all of the, inner earth rumblings that's going on, all of the quote unquote extreme acts of hyperviolence or ultraviolence, form of face eating and flesh burning and holding people hostage and making whatever. All of these are acts that are on their way out. And there are certain people in those societies that are striving to break free of those same reins, but then still hold on to their money. And it's going to be hard for them to do that. An example of this would be somebody like Katie Holmes. You know what I'm saying? Now trying to struggle to break free of the so-called Scientologist programming that was embedded in her from her time with this dude, Tom Cruise. But then the story I heard was that she basically agreed to get a part of that because she wanted to, further her career. Because that Hollywood stuff is not about love. Love is for human beings. When you get into the level of celebrity like those people and in the community of those people, you are now in a sphere of influence that is put into almost like a fishbowl. So you're free to do certain things, but then you're really not. You're actually more confined and under control than people with no money, because now your benefactors become your God. So in her, the story I heard was that the baby, Sori, is not actually Tom Cruise's baby. That's actually the baby for the dude from American Pie, the dude who played the jock, because they was going out when she was on Dawson's Creek. And then when Tom came through with his whole ritual, whatever, she, at the time happened to have one in the oven. So, mommy's baby, daddy's mate. So this allegedly drove this dude to drink and almost committed suicide and all that, because based on the hierarchy role in there, he's just like a delta. This dude, Tom, is like an alpha. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I've seen pictures over the years of her looking zombied out, drugged out, you know what I mean? Like, totally, like, just done. Obviously being worked on through that whole satanic system. Again, that system of Scientology, for those people who don't know, was created by a guy named L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard was the lover and large brother to a guy named Jack Parsons. And Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were connected to and were in sexual rituals with Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was one of the people on the ritual that they used when they basically were doing the whole thing with the USS Eldridge, which was the boat or the battleship that they talk about in this thing called the Philadelphia Experiment. It was a movie called the Philadelphia Experiment, in which they were trying to practice a form of invisibility, meaning the act of refracting and bending light around a given object to make it appear invisible, like you would see in Predator. But they didn't account for dark matter and dark energy in its effects on the magnetic field when you mess with the light spectrum or the angles of light at those frequencies. And what it actually did was put the ship in a time warp, of which when it rematerialized however many years later, some of the crew was fused to the ship, and some of the crew's skin was basically brought inside out, so their internal organs were external. And 2 or 3 of them were okay for the time being, but one of them eventually disappeared, literally vibrated out of reality, and then the other 2, one of them allegedly is still being kept somewhere. And then one of them basically was the one that they were running experiments on, which they found ways to stabilize the effect to keep the subject stable in this reality. And the way that they did that was by what they call the practice, the voodoo practice, or the evangelistic religious practice of what they call laying hands. You lay your hands on somebody. So they found that the subject was more stable when he began to become unstable. He began to smolder and fizzle like the skin was about to blow up. So when they would bring a white guy in and put the white guy's hands on him, the effect would slow down, but it would start again rather quickly. They then found, though, when they got a black man who happened to be a janitor at the time there, he came in and he put his hands on the guy. The guy stopped smoking right away. And so they deduced that there was something about melanin that interacted with dark matter and dark energy that somehow stabilized the magnetic field around the subject, who was destabilized due to the fact that he had no melanin because he was Caucasian. And in that, they needed to study melanin's interaction and the effects of melanin on a genetic level with its interaction with genetic and as an aspect of cosmic matter. And from that point on, this is when society started getting into it. They started really getting into the science fiction aspect of the society. You know what I'm saying? Because they already saw with the War of the Worlds ritual that people would believe it. So they also know that if they vibrationally put something out into the universe for the people to digest, the collective energy of the mental digestion of the mass populace can actually produce the energy for the actual thing that they have put out there to occur. This is why all the end of the world movies are being put out there at the same time that they are predicted, or the so-called predicted end of the world is supposed to be coming. You see what I'm saying? But the end of the world is always coming. The end of the devil world is always coming. You understand? And the devil's world is the world run by the demiurge. The demiurge is the collective energy or the collective embodied energy of the non-physical deities of pseudo higher dimensions who fell to lower dimensions because they did not want to go and return back to the all in all. And so they agreed to create a gulf within perfection that we will call physical reality, that the Bible refers to as the gulf, as a well to trap souls in it. So that way the souls that were spiritual, who were 50% spiritual, 50% 50% physical, 50% non-physical, when they would incarnate but lose the memory of why they chose to incarnate in the first place. And then be fooled and have to come to the realization that they were not human to begin with. So when Noble Joe Ali was talking about uplifting fallen humanity, we have to look at it in the greater context of what this really is applying to. It is applying to the upliftment of the fall, those of us who have fell or fallen and became so dense that the bones, the skull and the bones took over the reality and put us in a constant state of reintroduction, or what they refer to as reincarnation. Because the bones, being the foundation to physical reality, had to be manifested out of something crystalline. When you magnify a skull down to the utmost, you will see that it is a crystal, that it is made up of billions upon billions upon billions of little crystalline black dots. So the crystal ball that was being read, you see what I'm saying, is your brain, is your mind, is your thoughts, the things that manifest out and from those. So to uplift fallen humanity then is to uplift or to bring up the fallen, which is not only the physical fallen, but those of us who fell in the memory of what we truly incarnated here to do. Not just to make this place better. It's about making all things better everywhere at the same time, just by the realization that everything is messed up. There are some people in the hood I would mark or notice back when I was coming up, just observing things. There were some brothers who could just chill out on the dumpster all day. And then I knew some brothers who wouldn't sit on the dumpster or even get near it. You know what I'm saying? So, again, based upon the level of, you know what I'm saying, I don't want to say cleanliness or it's not even about hygiene or cleanliness at that point. It's more about the mentality. You know what I'm saying? But again, for all we know, brothers didn't even notice it was a dumpster. You know what I mean? So in that, we are constantly learning from the assessments we make. But judgments usually come in when things are put in the context of survival. But judgment also equates rational thought to most people. Yet most judges in courtrooms and things like that don't deal with rationality at all, because they have willingly become a part of and taken a job to uphold something that is a representation of Satan's or the satanic influence of the enemy. You know what I'm saying? So the mandate, again, of uplifting for humanity is left to all of us. But uplift fallen humanity is the same as Marcus Garvey saying, up you mighty race. And remember, these are two compatriots. These are two colleagues, two of the real brothers who was in it. But they both have flaws. Abu Ali trusted people who didn't have his best interest. So did Marcus Garvey. Yet, in learning from those mistakes, our species mind pattern has produced moguls and entrepreneurs that own their own things, even though they still deal with the devil. To show those of us who are of a higher consciousness but a lower financial bracket that it is still attained, that melanin can still attain mass riches and fortune within the physical reality that's against them. So these brothers are still fulfilling a certain need or aspiration, the same way that the so-called president does. And the fact that people who don't really know his politics are just going to accept the fact that he's black. And why not at the same time? Why not? They've been doing it for the fact what they done have 40 presidents that they don't all got white pictures of, so why not? However, turning a blind eye to the person's politics always puts you in an inferior position, because this dude is still down with them and doing what he's supposed to do for them. Because that's why they gave him the job. And the thing is, we all know that. Like, black people do not and have not necessarily created organizations to solely exclude white folk. White folk have done that. Black people have not had mass lynching within the past 50 to 75 years. We've never done that. Black people have not created laws to exclude people and herd people in the concentration camps and all that. We didn't do that. Neither did Mexicans. Neither did Chinese. Neither did Puerto Ricans. Neither did nobody else. You know what I'm saying? We didn't create a system in which, black police is just known for killing and terrorizing young white males. We don't have a society where that's happening. That's not in this reality. But it's slowly becoming that. Because kids younger and younger are just not giving a damn. Kids old, 3 years old, just getting in cars, bouncing, knowing how to drive well. One cop, I was reading in somewhere in Wyoming, stopped the car because he didn't see anybody driving. He thought the car was driving itself. Opened the door, it's a 3-year-old kid. Like a Moore's age. Driving a truck, man. These kids is trying to tell you something. They're telling you something. They're like, look, I'm out. I'm not getting what I need from the people who's supposed to be here, so I got to get it myself. Which means then that the consciousness level, in order to beat the regression protocols that are stuck in and the inhibitors, psychic inhibitors that they put in you through prenatal socialization, that means that the fetus is becoming conscious even earlier. That's why the Catholics get into the whole whether or not the fetus is alive or not, or whether or not life begins when the genetic code starts to map out when does life start and all that. Because that's also the Catholic Church's way to be able to deem when creation began. Therefore, if they know that, then they have the right to then govern humanity. You see what I'm saying? So they're not doing that because they want to help to stop women from having abortions. They don't want to stop black people from having abortions. And the majority of people in a lot of these countries in Africa are Roman Catholic. It's more Roman Catholics in Africa than Europe and Rome. So how that work? What they say? How they do that? Or where they do that at? You know what I'm saying? It's a trip, man. So you got to understand, the more consistent you become with yourself and the more you put yourself on the path to get it, the more you're going to have things. You could be on point, have all your ducks in a row and everything. And somehow, some way, somebody that you tried to work with or help with, whatever, dropped the ball. And it don't be you, but whatever the instance is, because you the conscious one, you always the responsible one. When you deal in extreme situations with the devil in magic or in physical altercation or whatever, you got to be totally committed to the physical act or violence or whatever's going on in that moment and not be caught up and the emotional aspect of it. It's like a fighter. Like a fighter, for some fighters, they got to make it personal in order for them to drum up the energy to execute what they need to do. You know what I mean? And some fighters are different. They go in totally void of emotion. You know what I'm saying? So what you're seeing is the yin and the yang, the masculine and feminine polarity, the passive and aggressive polarity in the execution of how it's being done. Sometimes the less dispassionate you are, the more you can get done. The more compassionate you are, especially things in business, the more sometimes you get burnt. Because business is war without guns. You understand? Business is things that have to get done when they need to get done. Therefore, a lot of business, good business, deals in what's known in certain circles as good faith and clean hands. Certain documents that you would send, we would send out, we would put that in there to let them know we know what's up. And what that means is that I deal with natural equity. Therefore, I look at what should have been done as done. Therefore, when the Creator created creation, it was created in the initial energy of what it was meant for. So, based on me striving to represent that, that is what I see everything as, regardless to what it is now. Therefore, as the Creator in my life, as a representation of this immense, massive, eternal thing, as a physical representation of that, if it existed in a physical form like me now, it would be like what I would be doing. Therefore, if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, then I'm creating an alternate version of what this thing is, and this is when the anti-God or the Antichrist comes in. It is made by man and fostered by the daemon or the negative angel, which is the negative angle of angel, which is the negative angle of light, which is also translated as knowledge, and how it is applied and given to the student as he is ascending into his position. So instead of people coming in your life as teachers, you have people coming in your life as handlers and controllers and babysitters. Not like a babysitter for your kids, but like people who they send to you as friends to basically watch you and influence the things that you do and report back. Each one of us got one of them people in their life. Somebody, at least one person in your life, based on the law of averages, is connected to some sort of government agency or whatever and keeping toll and tabs on you. It has to. Someone. You understand? So when I said that, whoever came to your mind is probably the person. Which is good for you, because now you know, because you are tip to the game. You're ahead of the game now. You know. So it's not now for you to then go, hey, I was listening to Super Heru Radio and I said this and I really feel like it's you. Like, you don't need to do all that. What you need to do from this point is to observe and see if the actions of this person is reflecting the thoughts that you have in before you just fly off the handle and, off the rip say that this person is this or whatever based on the intuition. Because at this point, that's all it is. Yet, just because it's an intuition, something you can't touch, don't mean it ain't real. Love is real, right? You can't touch that. But you do when you have sex. Do you see how something can be physical and non-physical at the same time? And you not even realize it because you're so used to things just being that way that you don't marvel at the fact that you can transport yourself in a point of ecstasy that you can only experience in that moment. But you basing it on experience and not necessarily the person. At least a lot of men ain't. You know what I'm saying? Because we as men, we can have sex with people we don't like. We can have sex with people we really don't like just to be put in a position of dominance over them. We will do things we don't like. We will act and be involved with things that we don't like just to be able to have that experience. And most times what happens is it may start out like that, and then, you might wind up falling for the girl. But then you got to remember the intent is kind of twisted. So you got to kind of come clean or dead it and see if it'll reignite itself later. Because there are spiritual, aka magical effects of love that have been perfected by us over the centuries that we don't even talk about anymore. Like the love of chocolate and where chocolate actually came from. Why? And why specifically chocolate and Valentine's Day, and chocolate and hearts, chocolate and heads, and chocolate and bunnies and eggs. Why chocolate takes forms like that, and why those forms are predominantly sought after and consumed by the public. Well, there was a guy named Henry I, Duke of Bavaria, and he was a cousin of Grand Senor at the Alhambra. And as an alchemist and a chef, foodie, he was trying to find ways to bring about a unification of the mind, body, and spirit to create a physical, to be able to eat food and have the food transport you the same way you would astral project in a meditation, that eating the food and the way the food is prepared becomes a meditation as such that you are able to astral project while you're eating. And that each food or each organ that is consumed, like the stomach of the lamb or the whatever of the whatever they're eating, has a zodiacal representation based on medical astrology. Well, the Duke liked chocolate. So he basically got into the science or whatever, through whatever, and they basically started to perfect the chocolate system to produce it with the properties based upon how the cocoa bean, the chocolate bean or the cocoa bean was cultivated. So one legend says that they started to get gold and started to, when they would till the soil to put the beans in to, get the chocolate or whatever, that they were sprinkling like gold flecks into the soil as well, which then added to the robust nature of whatever, how they perfected chocolate. So they would also have the chocolate being prepared while in spaces where they were also preparing illuminated manuscripts, So while they were speaking and going through the scholastic nature of what our culture or whatever was going through at the time of the Holy Roman Empire, this energy was being put into the chocolate the same way you could be in a studio and somebody spark a L, and then the essence of what the marijuana was actually became part of what made or helped make the record great. This is not to say that you have to do drugs to do that, but it's not to say that if you do drugs and create great music, that's not necessarily the wrong thing, so long as you're not abusing them and abusing yourself. That's just in my opinion. So I'm not saying do crack or coke, but I'm saying if you're doing that or you want to do that, eventually you're going to do it. So it ain't up to me to tell you to do it or not. It's up to me to tell you if you do it, you're eventually going to get possessed. That's that. So essentially, the science and the cultivation of chocolate began to be a practice of tradecraft passed down And Bavarian chocolates became one of the greatest chocolates ever made in the world that all of the people in the Old Dominions used to eat. They also used to have Marenkamp, which are these little black Moor's heads that they still sell, I think. Places like Sweden and stuff like that. Because over there they still have images of like what we today would over here call like little black Sambo, the Tar Baby, which is really an image of Shango Macho. They over there got the Gollywog, which over here we would call like the Tar Baby or the Pickaninny. But those represent the little black machine elves you sometimes come in contact with, or people have said to come in contact with or see, that help with the easing into the different frequencies, which are dimensions of the reality that you go into when you take dimethyltryptamine. These little things are physical representations of what I refer to as these little black machine elves. I think somebody else calls them that too, some guy wrote a book, calls them that too. But these are sometimes you'll be looking at something, you see some little black in the corner of your eye, and you look and it's gone, that's them. So again, everything that's non-physical has to have a physical representation in order to exist in a non-physical frequency. So in order for something to exist that you can't see, there has to be something down here that you can see that represents it, and vice versa. This is what's called high alchemy now, because now you're dealing with being able to turn the baser metal, which is the philosopher's stone, which is your pineal gland, into a higher octave, into what's the elixir of life, which is the activation of melanin in the pineal gland through the pituitary hypothalamus, which then creates the crystal chamber or the triangle that then activates the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is you, into the Merkaba band, which is the actual manifestation of your astral self into your present self. The old physics when we was coming up was that if you met yourself and you touched each other, it would destroy all reality. But the new physics is you see yourself, and so long as you don't get too involved, things will still work out. So just like in the old reality, they said Pluto is a planet. Now they're saying Pluto don't exist, or it's not a planet. But that's because a lot of these planets are actually warships, like the moon of Jupiter, Iapes. So that's their warship. It's the basis of what they call the Death Star in the George Lucas film. It's also a giant pineal. It also was a pineal gland that was inside of one of the great ancestors, if you call them. The ancients also call them Titans. And it was fashioned into this weapon, allegedly. But again, these are all myths and stuff that I've gathered from different books, and also my own inner journeys, when I went into sweat lodges and went into real sweat and stuff like that and really saw what I saw. So in that, me personally, I don't like getting into all of that publicly because that's not really the setting to do that, because that then deals with other aspects. But in retrospect of what we're talking about, these things that we perceive as small things actually have huge beginnings that we are now starting to become refamiliar with. And in the capacity of that, we've now been sucked into a frequency where you are somebody somewhere who might be right next door to you. You know what I'm saying? But you would never know right now because of the fact that it's not for us to necessarily know right now, but forums like this allow the actual possibility for that to happen. Because like I said, in order for this to be manifested, there has to be something going on spiritually that's putting us all in line to make certain things happen and to support each other to make those things happen, to create images and things like that put us in positive light and positive situations, but deal with the reality of where and whence we came, so that there's always something that can be referenced that regards to whatever they say it is what we say it is that's about this. So can no Caucasian or Muslim or anybody tell me what the Moorish Quran is. Because one, they not Moors, and two, they don't see Islam the way that I do, and three, they are fundamentalists based upon, again, we talked about many shows back about the introduction of Nazism into that whole thing through the Baptist Party. So this is why they're killing black people from the Bayesian tribes in Libya right now. And again, ain't no black people really saying anything or doing anything about it. Because again, Libya is now going to be a better Iraq. But Iraq is only as stable as Iraq can be. Because it was never meant to be a stable country after they left. Because they never really left. You know what I'm saying? They can't. They can't afford to give an inch to anybody. This is how drastic the situation has become. Therefore, like I said, weapons like the Iapades moon and things like this are things that these people are consciously trying to figure out how they could make it happen to help save themselves, because there's nowhere for them to go. And when I say they, I'm talking about specifically that 1% of the population that is down with it. I'm not talking about they slaves necessarily. They're slaves like the politicians and the entertainers. These people are just really the whim, and they're just really trying to come up at the end. They've already given up. That's why their music is not whatever it is. Halle Berry ain't never been the same since was born. That bitch can't make a movie to save her life. Look what that white man has done. She got to pay this white Nazi $23,000 a month, and the baby don't even live with him. She ain't even making a movie. But there's a real thing in Hollywood that they refer to as, what's the word they use for it? It's a unsimulated sex scene. You know what I mean? There's a simulated sex scene where they put the little jock strap on you and things like that. Then they got the unsimulated sex scene where you actually have sex. Now, this is usually practiced by the European films, but this has been, again, practiced since the mid-90s here in America. So, again, Monsters Ball, when you saw the sick getting dug out, that's what really was happening. And, yes, you know, it's sad, but in the end, using her as an example, this is what represents the ideology of where they're trying to keep black women's mind state in. They don't, not that they don't want that. They do want that. Here goes another flip on it. They do want those who are the elect and the spirit or the Christ consciousness or the Christ body politic to make something happen. They do that. They do want that. That's in their best interest, because that would help fulfill a prophecy for them, which would then show them that they're at a position where they would be able to rule for a certain amount of time, even though it would be really nothing. They want to get rid of all the people that they brainwashed and mind controlled already. And they want to get rid of their kids. That's why they're programming them to kill their children. And programming can be anything that is used to trigger somebody into an altered state to do something, whether or not they know they're doing it or not. They make movies and stuff like this show. They do this every day, and yet still people really blind-eyed act like this is not an operation against the so-called American people. But again, we are the indigenous nations. We're not of America. We're not American. The straw man I have and use in commerce is or was a U.S. corporation, which is now a disregarded entity. But that's not me. So whatever it does, all of that has to be brought into the context of what would be beneficial for it to do, and only I can dictate that. I can't leave that up to anybody else, because I can't trust nobody else with it. Once you rescind it, then what? Who's using it after you? Somebody's using it. Somebody's getting money off of it. Trust. Because that's what it is. It's a trust. They have to account for it. Remember, these people don't have no money. So when people try to rob banks and stuff like that, that's people stealing evidence of their debt that they got to account for. They don't have money to account for nothing. So they got to print money to account for the stuff that they can't account for. This is how deep they are in the hole. They got the attorney general about to be indicted. They're about to go in on this dude. But this is not about what he did with the Fast and Furious shit. This is connected to the whole not doing nothing about the Black Panther shit. And I'm not saying he should have. I'm saying that this is what they're going after him for. You know what I'm saying? So you got that. Then you got the other aspect downwind of the new election. You know what I'm saying? Where this dude Romney actually gets in, which is really laughable. That's really probably not going to happen because the American people will revolt. Nobody likes that dude. Only people like that dude are upper middle class white folk. And those white folk that's trying to get that status position like that. They're both puppets, but at least with the one that's there, everybody know that he there. And really, all he's done is kill people. Really, kill people, spend dough, and break off a couple of people with the unemployment. But again, anything written by these people can only last by the time they're in office. After that, it's all fiction. You know what I'm saying? So this thing is going into a reorganization anyway. It has to because, again, it can't account for nothing. There's always another scandal. They can't hide nothing no more. Saturn is direct. So long as you, in whatever your chart is, look at where Saturn is in 28 degrees of your 8th house. And, see where that's at. So really do the knowledge because this is a time for the Saturnian energy to be almost satiated by dealing with whatever needs to be dealt with to get things done. And sometimes you got to really be out of your character to do that. Sometimes you literally got to come out of the whole what you hear ascension thing to really deal with the physical aspect of it. But remember, the time in between you phasing from that to that is instantaneous. So you never really not in the sphere and the love of the Creator. We are never really outside of the quote-unquote Big Bang. We're still in it. You know what I'm saying? The universe is still expanding, which means the explosion that started everything is still going on out there. Eventually, it's going to reach the limits and start to come back in on itself. This is only a minuscule aspect of what reality really is. We're not even really in it. So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, choose your battles wisely and allow that which is not your concern to be what it is. Support it in its downfall. Support it in its uprising. Support it in both. Because in supporting it in both, you create a spherical space that allows everyone to become uplifted by the same perspective. Once brought to the same perspective that everybody's in trouble, then all we got to do is get to the point to isolate where the trouble is coming from. Once that's known, then it becomes a situation where people find out or try to find out why things have become what they have. Hey, it's become a situation where people have lauded themselves to become more than what they really are. and it's blasted everybody in the temporal lobe, where nobody knows how to function from a perspective of conscious reality, what's consciously happening to you. People are always referring to the things that happen to them as movies. Things are always referring to the things that happen to them as TV shows. People are always on their phones. People are always sending emails. People are always on their computers. It becomes a lauded effort just to find peace of mind, to allow people to function from a perspective of healthy living. You know, you can't create a function peacefully. It becomes a function of deniability almost for everybody, where everybody becomes a universal, like, orthogram for what everybody wants to get rid of, like, or get away from. And that's cool, so long as we agree that that's what it's going to be. And I don't think we've all agreed to that yet. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, 10:30? We get into some calls. 347, Super Heru Radio.
Hey, what's up, fam?
Hey, what's up, Queen? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
All right. How you
Peace
doing?
to you and your fam.
Thank you, and I say peace as well. How you doing?
Thank you. I love doing the knowledge with you. I swear, like, well, you already know because I tell you, but I just want to just keep telling you that, you know, you're an inspiration to me and my family, and I'm really blessed to have somebody like you on my cipher that I can learn from. And, you know, it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you for the support. I appreciate it, man. We really do. For real.
No doubt. Always, always. But I wanted to say this. Wow. First thing about that, the maggot penis thing. I saw that too. But you know what's crazy? What we don't talk about, because it's not really it's not in our nature. Well, it wasn't in our nature.
Right.
And for me and people like you, it's still not in our nature. But we can thank the white man or so-called white man for this too. The sex with dead bodies, necrophilia. And that's a practice that's becoming prevalent here now. It's a big problem in Europe, you know, because you got some of them that's against it, like, wow, like, you know, and it's called genital, they just call it genital maggots, genital worms. Like, it's, you know, they're cavalier about it.
Yeah, it's like it's all good. Yeah, they're really depraved over there. They're really depraved.
And it's coming here. It's here, like the sex with animals. I'm doing the knowledge.
That's the thing. You know, these black people, they get involved with these people and just don't even care. They don't ask these people nothing about themselves. They just go with the money and the fact that this person is involved, you know, taking interest in you and stuff like that. You can see it in them. And I know because I see these people every day.
Right.
And I really say, hey, how you doing? And, you know, because I'm not in the wrong. Like, I ain't do nothing.
Right.
So, and they can't even look at you. But the white man or the white woman say, hey, how you doing? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because there's a feeling of being kept when you're with them. You know what I mean? Them when they're with you. That people in those relationships don't really talk about. And a lot of them don't realize that's what's going on. But this whole psychosexual, you know, slave master, you know, I was with your woman, you were with mine situation, and it was put on have more money than you. This has created an apathy in both quote-unquote races that has warped the perception of both, where neither believes now that it can really sustain itself on its own. And this has now created a psychosis that is manifested in these children. Look at it.
I see. I know. And even myself, because I told you some time ago that I took my children out of public school. I took them out because of listening to you and a couple other brothers that was doing the knowledge on it. And I I was like, yeah, I had to. It was on my
Yeah.
spirit. I had to because I can see what other people can't see. So when you know better, you do better.
You
But
do
I
that.
find it so
Right.
hard even with them now because they've been indoctrinated for so long
Exactly.
that it's hard to like break that.
You can't. You gotta just do you until you around and know people who, you can get a treaty going with, and then y'all can recognize each other.
And that's a whole nother. That'll take a whole 2 lifetimes. Like, is that the point like you was talking about before with the whole progression and what it really means?
Yeah,
And
man.
it's like progression for us is like death because I really don't. I mean, I don't want to sound. Listen, I don't even care how I sound. If it's brash, look, it is what it is. And
Right.
I don't really see it going on. I don't see any institutions being built. I don't see none of that.
They're not.
I really don't.
They don't want them because that's not a viable way for them to maintain the money they make.
And the money they make ain't all that either, because even when you look at all of our sellout celebrities that some of us love so much, those niggas are broke.
Look,
I mean,
man,
how many episodes of Unsung do we have to watch?
Over that. How many stars are they gonna have? And
okay.
It's like I saw somebody send me a picture today of Dwayne Wade, some slick that he texted him with black toenail polish on, talking about. Then, you know what I'm saying? Like this is the level. You know what I mean? But I really feel like if they do shit like that, like that's what they really are. So it's like just be that and allow.
Yeah, it is what it is.
What it is, like, because in the end, I don't know what people in the black community expect these people. Like,
they expect a lot, and they want to be them.
What do you really think that these people are supposed to do for you? In the end, really, what are they really going to do? Because
that's the psychosis.
Right.
It's a big trade in places thing. It's like we're becoming the 18th, 19th century white man, and they becoming, and it's like, yo, I see it. Like real black people, who has a soul and who doesn't now. Like I can see it on their faces. I can really see it on their faces. They don't even look human to me. I can see it.
None of them. That's exactly the perfect way to say it. Because human to me means you have the capacity to phase back into your non-human form. So your non-human form is your spiritual form, and that's based on love. That's based on hope. That's based on the Creator. That's based on things that are eternal and brought forth. If you put a stick of butter, a stick of margarine, and a stick of what's the other one? The other fake one, I forget what it's called. But if you stick a piece of butter and margarine together, and you stick a piece of ants in there, the ants gonna go to the butter.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They're gonna go to the shit that's alive. They're not gonna go to nothing that they always do. That if you put a hamburger in front of them like that, unless it's hot, they're not gonna eat it. But if you put people next to the hamburger, they're gonna eat the fruit. So it shows you that there's a relationship that exists on a subatomic magnetic dark matter energy level that we as original people have a certain frequency to. And whether you're born in Ghana, born in Brooklyn, born in Dallas, or born in Japan, or whatever, whether you're born a dark-skinned Hindu or a light-skinned Hindu or whatever, if you somehow acknowledge that you have some sort of beginning in ancestry, some sort of indigenous people, that means you are of the ilk in your family that's going back to how shit was when in what they call God's country.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So a lot of people don't want to live there. So just like there's someplace messed up, there got to be somewhere that's not like that, based upon this prophecy that these niggas have interpreted and feel like they need to ritualistically match themselves up with to be able to rule shit. So that means that if we have something, you know what I'm saying, that represents that, then these niggas, then that's what these niggas want.
Right. And I leave them alone. Like, I've learned a long time ago. I don't even get upset about them. It's just they're not in my cipher anyway because, like I said, it's just me and my 3 sons, and I'm good. I'm not sad. I'm not so-called lonely. But it's just like it's coming to a head now. It's been coming to a head.
I'm trying to say. So let's all agree that that's what it is. Let's all agree that these people that's out there that's in that position ain't going to do nothing and stop making tapes and stuff.
Leave them alone, right? Because we're being inundated with bullshit. So if you don't see it now that we're flooded with it, son, you ain't never going to see it.
Like I helped create a worldwide multi-million-dollar industry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just now starting to see not even any money from it. You dig what I'm saying?
No.
But at the same time, there's people out there, you know what I'm saying, who are doing the opposite of what I'm doing. Not doing what I'm doing, but doing the white American version or white European version of what I'm doing, and harnessing thousands of dollars. And these people work for the government. So they're getting a government check. They're getting checks from their books. They're getting checks from their lectures. They're getting checks from their websites. You dig what I'm saying? And who's putting these out? I'm at least keeping it free. I'm at least striving to own everything, so that way whatever I put out, I know exactly what it is. It's like
to be independent or interdependent, because it's just you can't rely on anyone. You only can rely on self, and that's all you need. When you're whole, that's all you need. Everything falls into place.
Until like the Fellowship of the Ring show up, and then like you know, all go and flip on Sauron. You know what I'm saying? Like, because that's essentially what it all is. It's everybody going to Moore's door, the door of the Moors, because they're the ones who sit at the fifth dimension and see all things simultaneously at the same time, and live in it at once. That's us. That's called flawless navigation. So all I'm saying is we're at the stage now where we can implement a lot more than we give ourselves credit for.
I know, and I've seen that within my own. I'm doing things that I didn't even think I was capable of. So now I don't even use that mindset anymore. I don't say I can't or I don't know, because it's all within me already. I just haven't utilized it yet. It's all there.
And people who are the opposite spirit of that or come into your sphere of influence and try to influence you to the opposite is that off the rip, those people can't do it. And
most people in my family or people that I had as friends, they don't even want to talk to me no more.
No, what are they going to talk to you?
And I don't care, but it's like,
you know what I'm saying? But things
I don't even need a phone. Like,
that's
like it is what it is.
They look at it. They look at that as not being able to relate because they have given in totally to what's going on. But at the same time, what could you really talk to them about?
Right.
Once they bring up
and to them, this is not progressive. What we're talking about isn't progressive enough.
Anything they bring up, you automatically know is BS because they base it on what Western media is telling them it is.
But we can talk about hip-hop wives all day, but talk about something that matters, they go blank.
Right. Talk about, like, we could get into the whole, unless, unfortunately, you having sex with them. And then listen. You know what I mean? Like, that's the level of the reality now. We're not even trying to hear each other unless we're trying to have sex with each other. But once we have sex with each other, we want to even hear what each other have to say. You know what I mean? So it's like this whole backwards thing because we thinking like white people. And white people even know that.
Right, and they laugh. It's amusing to them.
Sophie Handler the other day, and there was this black chick on there, and she was really black. And at the end of the show, Sophie Handler was like, I really thank you for coming on the show and really being a black person. You know what I'm saying? Like being yourself, being black, for real. Like, you know what I'm saying? And all the
because they find themselves trying to, because they draw from us.
Right, but then the sellout.
And then when they meet the sellout or the one that's more white than them, they like, you're done. It's like, there's nothing I can do with you. Exactly.
Exactly.
Overcooked, yeah.
They do. A lot of them do. But they don't want to help us and give us nothing to get there. They want us to already be there and be like, oh, well, I'm sorry, and blah, blah, blah. Well, why don't you, if you knew all of this back then, why don't you come and get me then? Why are you coming to get me now that I got all this money? Why you want to tell me that I'm a part of this and my grandfather was down with this, I should get down with this? Why don't you do that when you knew that now? You knew that when I was fucking homeless.
Right, yeah. Right.
Mhm. But again, man, I don't want to cut you off, but I want to get somebody else before you close in. But thanks for calling, man.
No doubt. But before you go, can I ask one real quick question?
What's up?
All right. It's about cats. Now, when I was having an astral travel some time ago, my cat jumped on me as my soul was going back into my body, and he was trying to suck the air out of my mouth, and I sucked it back in. It looked like smoke. And as this went on for 3 times, after the 3rd time, he jumped off after he realized I kept sucking it back in. Could you do the knowledge on that?
You still have the cat?
Yeah. What?
Do you still have the cat now?
Yeah, I do. Mhm.
What's the relationship with the cat now?
I love him. I love my stinkums. But he is funny. He gives me the stink eye. He's sweet, but it's just he looks at me funny. And he acts funny, but...
Does he, when you go to sleep, does he sleep at the edge of the bed or he moves up by your head?
He used to, but he used to sleep at the edge of the bed. Sometimes he'll move up by my head, but most part, I don't have him in my bed with me anymore.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, so long as you practice that, don't have him sleep in the room with you, you should.
Yeah.
But no, that was a whole thing of him testing if he could do it, probably, because he loves you, obviously. But what I'm learning about cats, there's a book called The Secret Life of Cats.
Mhm.
And then there's another book called Cat Goddess. It's really good.
Mhm.
Another one called The Cat Goddess of ancient Egypt. It's really good too. Anyway, she was really revered. So cats that we have now used to be the size of like rhinos. You know.
Oh.
At one point.
And
were their own thing. So we domesticated them down, and they were domesticated down from. But the ones you got now is maybe a couple of generations away from like the ones we've seen in Africa. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But essentially, based on the consciousness level of the domesticated cat, the cat that chose to be more with the human, it had to become smaller. It had to adapt to how the human needed it in order for it to be fed and function and all of that. But there's still a part of it that's feral. So a lot of them forget that they have magic like that. You know what I'm saying? So with you, probably by the 3rd time, you probably realize he can do it. So he ain't trying to do it like that with you. They usually do that when they're trying to
kill you.
Yeah. Or they have become conscious of themselves to a degree enough by maybe wherever they came from before you,
right?
And were put into a altered state, and now seeing that a higher state of animal consciousness and the lower state of animal consciousness.
Because I couldn't breathe, and at that point I wanted to like get rid of him because I knew that wasn't good, but he hasn't tried to
get rid of him. If you do it again, I get rid of him. You know what I mean?
Because I can't. Thank you for breaking those books down because I couldn't find any info on cats. It's so hard to find information on them.
Mhm. Cats, brooms, and witches always go together.
Right, I know.
The broom is the ballast.
And he tried it. Yeah, he sucked my breath out 3 times, and once he saw I was sucking it back in, he stopped, and I couldn't breathe. I remember feeling like I couldn't breathe. Like this little bastard is really okay. So
because in doing that, they get higher consciousnness. You understand? It's
wow!
Like a dog eating human flesh.
Oh.
Or a lion eating a human. Like once you can't let that lion free because if they do, its consciousness is raised up. You understand? So it's heightened. more aggressive because it's now broken past the barrier of, it's like the bull jumping out of the pen.
Right.
Like they've broken the barrier of where the animal is and the threat begins or the consciousness begins now, So
right.
they're due for upgraded consciousness too. So are the trees. So are the rocks. So is the dirt. So is everything, because everything is messed up.
Oh,
so
man.
Switched up in order for everything to be all right. So, we just got to get put in a position to make that happen. So, inshallah, but again, thanks for calling, Queen.
Thank you, babe.
And peace to your family, man, and keep that nation strong.
Same to you, sweetie.
Peace.
Later.
.609, Super Heru Radio.
Thank you.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you have a call? Sorry. .469, Super Heru Radio. Great. Okay, well, we'll close it out. So yeah, guys, thank you guys for again coming through and keeping up with the current events and the hidden altercations and ramifications behind them, as well as a lot of the other spiritual insight, as well as, like I said, the whole chocolate thing. Yeah, like I said, there's a definite relationship with the ancient chocolatiers of the old Bavarian houses that started to supply the dominions to such a degree that it became an international trade and fetish for the Moorish and different types of nobility that existed in the Old Dominion, which then became a way for them to gain influence in the ports of these dominions as chocolate brokers and people who started to create candy houses that came from the chocolate, because at one point they were just selling it as huge bricks and they were cutting it like meatloaf. Then one more had the idea to mold it, and once it was refined into this chocolate as, let's say, syrup, put it into actual molds that would be reminiscent of symbols that would be, reminiscent of nature, to almost make it like a man-made fruit. And so they started to infuse some of the chocolate with the liquor and stuff, because at the same time you had the liquor situation where the Moors were manifesting all of the ales and the bourbons and the scotches, the Glenlivet and all of that stuff, going all the way back, where then once the Templars became in, they couldn't deal with the heavy dark stuff, so they started to strain it and use more of the lighter liquids. So a lot of the things like in Russia, through Pushkin, they learned about the whole vodka. They started to strain it and, use that as a way to help keep, as a national drink to help fuel people warm, due to the clear liquor aspect of it. But again, it's just a diluted aspect of the original darker version that it was derived from. So these practices became what became known as the fineries or the luxuries of court that were then so opulent or so given at the time that a lot of the, people who were just coming into that art, especially those white serfs and people who was out there. So essentially it, again, got corrupted after, the 1700s. But all of these things became prevalent amongst everyone else. And, it is what it is today. But, again, essentially, it's all Moorish because of the melanin aspects and attributes of it. and the endorphin that's released upon the consumption of chocolate, being it genetically and metaphysically connected to the feeling you feel when you get love, is why it has to be associated with such natural things, because the actual aspect of melanin through it is just like with DMT. It activates that chocolate does for the palate, the spirit, as an endorphin, what DMT does for the pineal gland in the same way. So in that, again, it's a way of ingesting melanin. So the darker the chocolate, the more dark matter and dark energy you got up in you. So think about that next time. So when you think of white chocolate, again, you're thinking about a bleached out aspect of it. It doesn't make it any less good, but it's not as potent as melanin. So the more you shun these dark women, it's okay. I'm going to put them in videos and everything else. All of these dark-skinned girls that these people don't like, and you don't see in these videos, don't worry. You'll see them in Team Cordova videos. You'll see them in whatever it is we do. You'll see them in whatever animation or whatever it is we're trying to do, we're striving to do. So those of you, this is our last broadcast here. We're going to be in NYC this Friday on the 13th. We're going to make it real dope. Thank you for all coming through. We're going to be at the Forbidden Planet on the 4, 5, and 6 train, Union Square. Come through. It's right across the street from the Lowe's Theater. We're going to have copies of the Dark Skull 418 for sale. It'll also be the launch for the Dark Skull 418 for sale on ebook, Amazon, through Atlas Books. And we're going to have a lot of associated materials, as well as the launch of the album, which is a soundtrack album mixtape CD of the DS418 book. 100% of Team Cordoba, also with one feature with Jenny Shakti Fujita. Peace, Jenny. And it's really live, man. We're going to have a lot of the stuff there, and we want everybody to come down. You know what I mean? Everybody who travel or whatever, we really thank you in advance for coming through. It's going to be first come, first serve on the hard copies and stuff. But like I said, we'll have other things like posters and stuff you can do the nods through and pick up, as well as copies of the record. So we really strive to get you through. I hope you guys come through, and thank you for the support. Also check out www.cookingmorewithless. Also check out www.blackmambaworkouts.com. Also, if anybody knows anything about a website called To Leap, I don't want to advertise them, but they use Celine's picture, and I want to be able to find out who they are. It seems to be some type of wellness, new age, progressive website, and we want to be able to, catch that check. So if anybody has any intel on that, who they are, whatever, or can holler at them directly, please let me know so we can do that and handle that ourselves. So with that, thank you guys on Super Heru Radio for coming through. We're going to see you next Moon Day. Be safe. If you have any questions, emails about any of our upcoming events, again, we're going to be there live this Friday at the Forbidden Planet, Friday the 13th, Saturn Direct Scorpio. It's going to be live, man. It's going to be dope. And it's going to be at Union Square. You take the 4, 5, and 6 here in New York. The N and the R, the J, the Z. And like I said, it's right across the street from Lowe's Theater. I really appreciate you guys' support for helping us get this far. And thank you for all of those who have helped us personally that we know in our lives, Laquans, Jamel, and those people who have been nothing but love and support. And those people who, who don't, it's all good, you know what I'm saying? But I know who you are, and I know you know that I know, so I guess that's why niggas don't holler. And it's okay. We're just at Team Cordova real enough to keep it that. So we want to say peace to all and give love and shout to all the people in the universe and uplift all humanity. Peace.